Thanks for stopping by, guys, and welcome back to GearBlocks. Today we're going to be taking a look at a couple of community creations that were recently submitted for a competition I hosted here on YouTube. Now, the main requirement for this build was that it would only be powered by an inline 4-cylinder small block engine. That way, all of these vehicles should have a similar power pack, but the goal was to get them as fast as possible. There were different points awarded for different categories. The first thing was how quick and tight it could take a corner, acceleration, how fast it could go from 0 to 60, as well as a score for its top speed, and an extra point for special attributes and interesting designs, such as transmissions, bodywork, and so forth. Now, all of these cars were given points depending on where they ranked in those certain categories, and they came together to create a ranking system or a scoring system. Now, we did have 10 submissions, however, we did have a tie in those rankings, so there will only be 9 places with 2 creations sharing a spot. So that being said, let's go ahead and get this going. Now, the first quote-unquote vehicle that was submitted for this competition is the Running Fred by the Mechanical Menace. This is essentially an interpretation of the in-game default, the Walking Fred, however, it is now powered by an inline 4. Unfortunately, while this thing does technically move, it is extremely difficult to get going with any reliability. And therefore, I really couldn't get any stats for its acceleration, its top speed, or anything else. Unfortunately, that means that its only points were in special, and that it quite certainly is. So that means that Fred here comes in 9th place. Next up, we have the Inline Trolley by Homo Donatus. This thing is interesting. It's one of those joke builds as well, but comically enough, it came second in its acceleration. For some reason, this thing being just so small and having like no transmission or no gearing has made this thing really fast at getting going. However, it doesn't have any sort of transmission, so its top speed is really low, and its steering is pretty much awful. As you accelerate, the front end lifts off and you have no steering whatsoever, and as soon as you let off acceleration, you do have steering, but it's really bad, and it's a chore to try and keep this thing from flipping. That being said, it is kind of goofy, and therefore has placed in 8th. Now, the next vehicle we have is the Ibishu Pigeon, I believe. I may have pronounced that wrong. Once again, submitted by Homo Donatus. This one is actually like really great from an aesthetic point of view. I actually love the fact that, let me get in here, it has a rear view mirror. I don't think I've seen another car that has a rear view mirror. I love that. Also, it has some really fun features like the doors all open, including the hood. And other than that, it has some pretty good stats with speed and acceleration. The acceleration of this was 9.61 seconds, and the top speed was 111 miles an hour. Unfortunately, the thing that really holds this back is it's so top heavy that trying to take corners is not fun. You can already see it trying to tilt as I just barely do 60. It's an absolutely lovely build and has some really nice things like, let's grab this, a fully detachable cover. However, due to its tilting and due to it just wanting to roll, unfortunately it finds itself at 7th. And after that, we have the Hot Rod submitted by Aloye. This has one of the best steerings out of the group here, and also has a pretty decent bodywork. One of the things that really makes this one special is it comes with an automatic transmission, which you can see there all colored up. Unfortunately, the transmission is a little finicky and can struggle switching down in gears, it seems. So that being said, its acceleration is pretty low in comparison to some of the others submitted, and its top speed sits somewhere in the middle. Due to its poor acceleration, it finds itself slotting at 6th. Up next is the RGS Racing Little Baller by Bernardorgs. I absolutely love the look of this design, with little details like the engine's intakes actually being in the little side air scoops, as well as the fact that this is using a ball and plate CVT design. However, it's not automatic, it is on a shifter. And while this car did come as one of the quickest in the bunch, coming in 3rd for its top speed, and its absolutely lovely design, I had a few issues with it. One, while in corners, it really likes to flip. Unfortunately, the front end is a little too grippy sometimes, as well as it doesn't accelerate properly. First gear is really finicky, and the only way I could get it to drive in first gear is by also holding the starter motor, which kind of disqualifies it in the sense of it can't actually start under its own inline 4 power. It really requires that starter motor to get it up to speed. So for those flaws, it is unfortunately coming 5th. And the next build is an interesting one. This is the Buzzard V2 submitted by Aloye as well. This one is not exactly what I was expecting. It does technically fit the requirement of a vehicle. However, this is a helicopter. That being said, because it is a helicopter, it can do some just downright impressive things when it comes to speed, giving this the fastest top speed of all the vehicles I had played with today. Unfortunately, because it is also a helicopter, it doesn't have the best acceleration or really any steering. It can be steered, but it is very hard to control. It gets most of its points from the fact that it is the fastest, and it's just kind of cool, to be honest. Next on our list is the Inline 4 rear-wheel drive with a 5-speed automatic by Nura Fizza, I believe. Now, this car, despite its size, has one of the best actual controlling, handling, feeling vehicles here in the group, coming in 3rd overall for its handling, 5th in its acceleration, 7th in its speed, and 4th for its style, solely for the fact that this has a really interesting transmission. It isn't perfect by any means, but it's kind of cool to see the actual selectors for it moving. From what I can tell is happening, there is under the seat a system that if the engine is moving fast enough, it starts to progress the actual transmission to the next gear. There's also back there a bar which seems to be measuring the torque output as well, so that if there is too much torque, it will try and downshift. And that is all being essentially controlled by the colored arms on the right that decide if a gear should be accessible, depending on the actual speed and RPM of the engine and the output. So while this is quite bulky, it drives really well. It has some hiccups downshifting, but as for everything else, this is a really good build. Just overall, does really well and drives really well. And in 2nd place is where we have our tie. This is the very fast tractor Ursa C411 by P-Job. Few things to say with this one. One, I just absolutely love the design of it. The fact that it is a tractor with spoilers. For aesthetics alone, it hit 1st place. However, it does actually have a very respectable top speed of 167, a decent acceleration of 16.02 seconds, 0 to 60, and it's relatively controllable. Now, what kind of bumped this up as well is there were a number of vehicles that, while they did have slightly better stats, did actually flip while trying to steer, and even though this does understeer a little bit, it is extremely stable at the speeds that you are pushing it around corners. So for that reason, the Ursa sits at second. Alongside the light Mark 17 by Lambo Squat. This is kind of what I was expecting for just pure raw power. This car has the best handling of the group that I've seen. Comes in third for its acceleration at 7.58 seconds. And sits at second for its top speed of 217. Now this has a 3-speed manual transmission and just absolutely drives like a dream. Unfortunately, because it is just a raw chassis, it does lose a few points in special, but it was still enough to easily take second. And finally we have first, the RA4-2 by Mafia Man Aaron. This one is not only wonderful to look at, but actually had the highest acceleration out of all the vehicles in this competition, has some pretty decent handling, and has a more than respectable top speed of 157. So, with that being said, I want to thank everyone who has participated in these events, in this competition, submitting their designs. They were all lovely to look at and mess around with, and I may have gotten a few ideas of inspiration for some future projects. That being said, you can find all these vehicles down below in the video description, as well as a little chart to give an idea of how I actually did the tallies and totals for these events. So with all that said, I'm going to end it here. Thanks for stopping by, thanks for sticking around, and until next time, peace.